July 28, 1914, a single moment in history. An assassination that would ignite a global inferno. No one saw it coming. One man's death would change the world forever. But what was behind the chaos? And how did the world end up fighting in the trenches, facing horrors beyond imagination? In this video, we take you into the heart of the Great War, World War I. The war that not only changed the political landscape but also changed the very nature of warfare. A conflict that still echoes through our world today. So, if you want to understand how a single spark led to a global firestorm, stick with me. And make sure to hit that like button, because this story is one you don't want to miss. It all started with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, on June 28, 1914. A shocking moment that, in the blink of an eye, triggered a world at war. But, was this death really the cause? Or was it the catalyst that lit the fuse of a much larger explosion? The assassination was just the tipping point. What followed was a web of intricate alliances and promises of defense between countries. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia, and within days, Europe was plunged into chaos. But behind the scenes, militarism, imperialism, and nationalism had been building up for years. Let's break it down. Militarism, the belief that national interests should be defended with military power, had been growing since the late 1800s. Countries were locked in an arms race, developing bigger, faster, more destructive weapons. Think machine guns, tanks, and airplanes, technologies that would soon change warfare forever. Europe's powers, from Britain to Germany, were all racing to arm themselves to the teeth. But militarism wasn't just about weapons, it was about the mindset. Every nation feared the other would strike first. And so, they built alliances. It's like a deadly game of chess where each country was just waiting for someone to make the first move. You had the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy, on one side. And then, the Triple Entente, France, Russia, and Britain, on the other. These alliances were designed to prevent war, but instead, they turned every skirmish into a global conflict. All it took was one match. And that's exactly what Franz Ferdinand's assassination was. Now, let's talk about imperialism. European powers were competing for global dominance. Countries like Britain, France, and Germany had vast empires that spanned continents, Africa, Asia, the Pacific. But there was a problem. These empires were often in conflict with each other over who controlled what. Nationalism was also on the rise. In places like Serbia, people wanted independence. Ethnic groups were pushing for self-determination. Austria-Hungary, sitting on top of many diverse ethnic groups, feared this rising tide of nationalism would tear its empire apart. Serbia's nationalist group, the Black Hand, was determined to carve out a greater Serbia, free from foreign rule. They saw Franz Ferdinand as an obstacle to that vision. And so, they killed him. But this wasn't just about one man's death. It was the ignition of a much larger conflict, one fueled by empires fighting for control and people fighting for freedom. And then, it exploded. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia on July 28, 1914. Russia, an ally of Serbia, mobilized its army. Germany declared war on Russia. France and Britain were soon drawn in. By August, Europe was at war, and the world followed. But what were these nations fighting for? Power? Territory? Survival? Or was it just a series of misunderstandings, one after another? One thing was clear. The war wasn't going to end quickly. And it was going to change everything. On the Western Front, the war took on a nightmarish form: trench warfare. Soldiers dug deep into the earth, living in conditions that would make any sane person shudder. The front line stretched from the English Channel to Switzerland, a long, blood-soaked line where the fighting never stopped. Trench warfare meant endless battles over tiny pieces of land. The Battle of the Somme, Verdun, Passchendaele. These were the battles that saw millions die. And for what? A few hundred yards gained or lost. It was the very definition of futility. And in the trenches, soldiers faced not only bullets but the constant fear of gas attacks: chlorine, mustard gas, poisonous, suffocating death. The trenches were a world of their own. Mud, rats, disease, and the ever-present specter of death. For 4 years, soldiers faced this hell. And yet, nothing changed. The war was a deadlock. World War I wasn't just fought with guns and men. It was a war of innovation. New weapons and technologies turned the battlefield into a place of unprecedented destruction. Tanks, heavily armored vehicles that could trample over trenches, were used for the first time during the Battle of the Somme in 1916. They were slow, unreliable, and often broke down. But they were a glimpse into the future of warfare. A future where machines would play as big a role as men. Aircraft, too, were revolutionizing warfare. Fighter planes dueled in the sky, the famous Red Baron among them, while bombers rained down destruction from above. World War I saw the dawn of modern aerial combat, and the future of military technology would never be the same again. The war wasn't just confined to Europe. As European powers fought, their colonies across Africa and Asia became battlefields. The Ottoman Empire joined the Central Powers, dragging the Middle East into the conflict. British and French forces fought the Ottomans in Mesopotamia, Palestine, and Gallipoli. And in Africa, colonies were torn apart as European powers turned them into theaters of war. World War I was truly a global conflict. Nations far from the battlefield were drawn into the conflict, not just because of empires, but because the war was a fight for dominance, a clash of civilizations. After 4 long years of fighting, the war finally came to an end. The Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire, were defeated. On November 11, 1918, Germany signed an armistice, ending the fighting. But the real work was just beginning. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, officially ended the war. But the consequences were devastating. The map of Europe was redrawn. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and the Russian Empire were gone. New nations were born. But the treaty imposed harsh penalties on Germany: territorial losses, military restrictions, and reparations. This would sow the seeds for future conflict. World War I was not just a war, it was a turning point. It altered the course of history. New nations emerged, old empires crumbled, and the balance of power shifted. The horrors of the war left a deep scar on the collective memory of humanity. But perhaps the greatest lesson of World War I is this: the cost of war is too high. Millions of lives were lost, and for what? The war was meant to end all wars, but it only paved the way for more. And so, as we remember the Great War, let us also remember the importance of peace. Want to learn more about how history shapes our world? Subscribe to Unleaded History, and hit the bell icon to never miss an episode. And don't forget to share this video with others who need to know the true cost of war. Let's keep the conversation going. This is a series of 9 great wars that has occurred in modern and ancient history, do not miss any episode. Do not forget to hit the subscribe button.